Hello and welcome to a new episode of Other Record Labels. I'm your host, Scott Orr, where we talk about the art and culture of running an independent record label. Thank you so much for listening to all of these episodes, and we're back with another interview episode, and today I'm speaking with Nick, one of the co-founders of Moderna Records, and yes, we tackle that unfortunate name that just so happened to also be a drug company that would come up many years after they've been in existence. And this is actually one of my favorite record labels, and I gush all over this episode, so I apologize for that. But I just love the stuff they put out, and I was listening to their latest release just this morning. I adore this record label, and they are based out of Montreal, so they're Canadian, so that really helps as well. They put together such beautiful packages, and they have such incredible artwork, and their neoclassical instrumental stuff is just out of this world. And so I really hope you enjoy this interview, and make sure you check out modernarecords.com. Also, please head over to our website. You know, I will say I've been receiving a lot of different emails, and what I'm doing is I'm trying to put together some new episodes that address some of the things that that I hear from you in the emails. And you can always email me, podcast@otherrecordlabels.com. We have some incredible resources coming up in the next couple of weeks and months. We have some incredible episodes where we tackle some of the things that have been of concern to you. For example, how do you get an artist to sign to your label? If you have the imposter syndrome, if you are new, if you're just starting a label, how do you justify taking a cut from a band if you're brand new? So we tackle all of that in the next couple of weeks. I'm really excited to get into that. In the meantime, go to otherrecordlabels.com, where you can get access to all of our resources. And like I've mentioned before, I constantly am updating that site to make sure that it's organized, and you can now search by topic. And so head to otherrecordlabels.com. I'm a huge fan of the label. I'm a huge fan of this genre. Let's dive in. I very much like, I love this genre, and I'm so excited to talk to you today because I really want to kind of dig into this and what it means to be a label in doing this type of music. And very much like, electronic music and dance music, it's so nuanced and really hard to put a label on. Calling it instrumental is a good starting point, but how do you classify the genre of music that you do? It's a little bit more evolved than just classical music.
Yeah, for sure. It's really funny because across geography and across platforms, there are probably like 6 different labels people use for us.
Oh, yeah.
I'd say like our name actually stems from people were calling it modern classical in Europe. Actually.
Okay.
And so I think that's where my business partner kind of came up with that name. In the US, people call it neoclassical.
Right, sure.
But that neoclassical has its own history as well, which is actually pretty different than what we're doing.
Okay.
People also use the word minimalism, which I think we have a lot of minimal aspects to our music, but it doesn't fit into the minimalism of, the 60s and 70s.
Right.
And things of the sort. So yeah, I mean, I tend to tell people now we're like melodic, instrumental, minimalist music. With the emphasis on melody, I guess.
Sorry, I lost you a little bit. I'm just gonna keep it. If I lose you, I'll try not to hang out on it too much, just because I know we're recording your end.
Yeah, for sure. I've been losing you here and there too for some reason.
Well, it's as to be expected. You're a world away. So this, I have to ask you this question. Our folks are going to want me to ask, and I know you're probably annoyed by this, but what was it like that moment? What was going through your mind when a company called Moderna started working on the vaccine? Like, what happened? Oh, yeah. What was happening there in your mind?
Yeah, that's a great question. What's funny actually is my dad first pointed it out to me.
Oh, okay.
And said like, hey, look, there's this company, and hilariously, like Dolly Parton has put money into it, so there's these funny things. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. I mean, I guess we're going to go down in SEO, now.
That's right, right.
And then the person distributing our music at the time wrote me, he was in Germany, and wrote me to say, like, you guys should capitalize on that, that kind of thing. And we have mostly just thought that it's funny, I guess. Like I would say we've gotten 24 emails from people over the last year, pointing at it and making a joke about it. And
okay.
So it's kind of this weird thing now where we can tell people like Moderna, like the vaccine.
Like the vaccine.
Which is really weird. But we're just kind of trudging along, and I mean, we've had our name for 6 or 7 years.
So well, I know, and actually, it probably took me about like 6 months of hearing about the vaccine to not associate it with you, because as soon as I heard it, I was more familiar with your label than the vaccine, and so I had a closer association with you guys for a while.
That's cool.
But
it's now such a big word, obviously.
Well, and at least it's associated with the good side of the pandemic, as opposed to Corona beer took a real hit in the beginning.
Right.
So
yeah, that's true. And actually, this is maybe a segue. I mean, it might be something we talk about later too, but pandemic related, and talking about the good side of the pandemic, is that one of my biggest joys working on the label through the pandemic has been seeing and talking to people about how this kind of music calms them and brings them some peace.
Interesting.
So it's actually brought a different appreciation to me for the music that we're working on, and that I'm seeing it through a different light now.
Yeah. And are you okay with, I'm going to ask, it's ironic. I do want to touch on this subject of how some of your audience may be passive listeners. And are you okay with your music and your artist's music and your art sometimes being a utility more than being art for people?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. It's actually a very strange one too, because we built our label a couple years before Spotify playlisting like really, really took off. Mm-hmm. And of course, like all the other services as well that do the same thing. And what's really strange is that we built up this really, really dedicated fan base that we still connect with.
Okay.
And so we very strangely, and we were pretty anti-playlisting at that point in time. Like we talked about it a lot, about how we actually didn't want to be making music for that.
Sure.
And then of course, like things kind of worked out for some of our artists, and we've started to feature on those things. And so I would say that we still very intentionally choose music that sits on its own, and that's really well made and that people are going to care for. And then it's kind of a bonus for us if it does get this passive listening. And we try to think of it as, hopefully that's just like a second function of it. And that's something that people can find joy in. Like we're aware that people, might listen to it for sleep or for, over a studying or something like that.
Right.
But we think of it as it's an extra function, and that some people are finding it that way. And for sure, a lot of people are finding it that way now. But yeah, I guess there's that utilitarian side of it, that music can be a lot of things.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, that's a good approach. And I've always, and I know I've seen you guys, you've had, I think it appears that you've had some great success with playlists, and Spotify has picked a lot of your guys, and that's fantastic. I always see that, those little blessings as a way to enable pressing vinyl or doing something for our active listeners. So I try not to when I think of the passive listeners, I try not to be patronizing towards them, because I feel like their passivity funds our more active listeners, because we may not be able to afford to do vinyl had it not been for a playlist or whatnot. That's my view.
Yeah, and I missed probably the first 2/3 of what you said.
Did you? No, that's okay. Let me rephrase it. I before the satellite drifts out of range again. I think my question about passive listeners and active listeners is that the way I view it personally is that passive listeners can enable us to do things like vinyl and some of the projects that we do that are more enjoyed by our active listeners, that maybe we wouldn't have been able to do had it not been for a playlist.
Yeah.
Is that true for you guys?
I think that's a good way of looking at it. And I think we're finding in the last year or two a bit of a bridge between those. I'd say like 2018, 19, it became a lot of listeners' goals was to hit these playlists.
Yeah.
A lot of artists' goals. And just because they're seeing like their peers and how many streams they're getting and things of the sort. And I think there's a lot more reality now. Like the market's become quite saturated for playlisting, even more so than before. And I think there is more of a thought of, yeah, what can this help me do? And some artists are aware of the fact that, once your track comes off a playlist, you don't have like that following that someone else may have. And so kind of starting to see it as that kind of bonus of, yeah, it can help me fund a tour or a live show or a vinyl or a video or something of the sort, or just fund my music making.
What has streaming done for instrumental music outside of playlists? Because I personally credit the accessibility of streaming as a key factor in my ability as a music fan to discover new genres, because it gives you that time to listen to an entire catalog and really immerse yourself in a genre or in an artist. What role does, outside of playlisting, have you noticed that kind of smorgasbord of streaming has helped at all?
Yeah, that's a good question. And my mind is going into a few different places. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say, whether it's passive or active listening, like, I do think that people have access to a lot more music now. And I heard you reference on a previous episode, I'm not even sure which one at this point, but that, yeah, like there used to be kind of a budget of, I also, would save up money and go buy like one record a month or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And when I really started diving into more stuff was when I was at music school, and there were like libraries that I could borrow from, And so I feel like streaming has kind of done that, where instead of it being like something that only specific people can access, these catalogs, whether it's financially, like someone who has a lot of money, or whether it's through, some kind of program or something. So I do think that people are listening to a lot more music, and I think genres are, in a sense, blending a lot. Like, I'm seeing a lot of pop musicians try to do more instrumental stuff. I'm seeing instrumental musicians try to do more pop-oriented stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think it's also actively creating a new sound world where people are trying different things as well as artists.
Yeah, and I think you're probably right, and we've seen, like you said, we've seen some songwriters who will dabble in ambient or instrumental music, and I feel like kind of the barriers that have been brought down when it comes to distributing music, that you could do a digital only release and then home recording that's happening. There is that freedom to say, in my off year, I'm going to work on trying to be creative a different way through instrumental music. I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, totally. And we actually just put out a singer-songwriter named Linda Rum from Hamburg, Germany. She is mostly known for indie music and is grew up playing organ and piano. And it's really neat for her to be able to say, like, hey, I wrote this piano song like last week, and it's totally different than the other stuff I do. Are you interested in putting it out? And it's someone that we may not have discovered otherwise, which is really cool for us as well.
Yeah, that's really cool. One of the profound things I've noticed about your label is the seemingly conscious effort to put a face on the artists and to bring them out as individuals to the forefront, which is generally hard to do with non-vocal music. Is that something intentional for you guys?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've never thought of that link of, like, actually often a face goes with the voice.
Right.
So that's something to think about. Yeah, we see ourselves, I have to credit my business partner, who is also the label founder, Evo.
Okay.
Is, I would say, like, the reason I joined the team really is he's the world's biggest music fan. He's so dedicated. He is so precise in his listening, and he really, really cares, like, about discovering talent. And our roots as a label were really about discovering people who didn't have anywhere to put their music out and trying to build their profile. So I think it's always been super, super artist focused in that sense, and that he doesn't have his own project. He's not pushing his own music. Like, he cares really deeply about each of the artists that we bring on. And that's something that really attracted me. It was like, oh, this person, like, he's not in it for himself. He's in it because he literally cares so much about every one of the artists we put forward. And so it can be a problem for us at times because we don't have our own quote unquote, like, we do have a brand, I think, but we're not pushing the label, we're pushing the artists that we have.
Right.
And so, yeah, our identity has become tied to all these people. we want the best for all of them as well.
Well, it's interesting to hear you say that you aren't pushing the brand of the label, because I am a fan of the label, and I get these alerts from Bandcamp every time you release something new, and I can instantly add it to my library because I know that I'm going to like it. So whether or not that's intentional from your part, from a fan's perspective, the brand is definitely strong.
Yeah, and I do think tied to all that, like we definitely act as curators, and so we are thinking about you when we choose someone, because we are thinking about the relationships we've built with people, and in a sense, maybe it's just that our brand is tied to all these individuals as well, and all these groups, and so yeah, we're definitely thinking along a curatorial line as we're putting things together. And
do you ever feel handcuffed in any way to say, I want to try this artist, but I'm not sure our audience would appreciate it?
Oh, we don't feel handcuffed, I would say, but we have definitely put a few things out that people did not respond to. And, we put out effectively like an indie rock record 2 or 3 years into the label that was, we thought was quite minimal sounding.
Yeah.
And it's a great record, but it was definitely like too far out of left field for some people. And one of the things we think about with active and passive is we do try to balance records that are really, really for our fans. Like I'd say the stuff that's a little more either electronic or pushing genre boundaries a little bit more. We are actually thinking about our really active fans when we're doing that, because we know that it's not going to land all these huge placements, and that's really important for us. So we're kind of thinking just about balancing who's listening to us and those sorts of things. But I would say that our tastes guide us more than anything else, though.
That's good.
Yeah, we're doing it for ourselves too.
I going back to the artists and giving a face to the artists. I also loved the photos of the artists' workstations that you would share, their mic'd up piano or their collection of modular synths. A good amount of gear porn, but it also helps the listener get a visual for how these songs were created and that they were created. They're not just like a software preset. I love that about those photos.
Thanks. Yeah, that's we really are trying to bring, I'd say like intimacy is a big part of our label. Like whether it's the close mic'd piano or whether it's just the fact that a lot of our artists are recording in home studios and bedrooms and things of the sort. Like we're really trying to create like a direct connection. And so I think seeing that some people are gearheads, like I am one.
Yeah, same.
Yeah,
I have to unsubscribe for a little while. Otherwise, I click through too many things and then want to buy something.
Oh yeah, totally. That's a thing. And then other folks are, design. I think we have a lot of design fans as well. So just like really beautiful spaces, and it is interesting. Like we're curating the music, and we're also curating when we're asking people for photos and stuff. Like we give a lot of pointers and a lot of tips for like what people like to see and how to. I would say like most people's photos are very natural in terms of what their setups are, but just ideas of types of ways that people like to see your setup, and I think that's a way to help people connect. To the intimate sound and also to the intimate space that people are working in.
And so you're across the globe from some of these people, I imagine. So you're kind of art directing these photos and requesting them?
Yeah, totally.
Good for you.
I mean, it's the interesting thing about, I moved to Whitehorse 3.5 years ago now, and I kind of wondered if it was a good idea moving away from Montreal, but we do all this from a distance anyways.
Sure. So, yeah. You can be anywhere. Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. Can you give me a backstory of the label? I'm kind of curious as to how this all came together.
Yeah. So, my business partner, Evelyn Lutzy, who's the founder, was working on some solo piano stuff in, I'd say 2014 is my guess from our chats, and was starting to connect with people through SoundCloud. And SoundCloud was really important for our first couple of years.
Interesting.
Just like meeting people through that and starting to do some home recordings. And as he was dialoguing with folks, was just realizing that a really big need was a label in the genre. Like a lot of people he was talking to just didn't know how to put their music out, didn't know where to put it, and so just decided to start doing that on his own and set up. Had probably about 5 or 6 people he'd put out when I joined the team, and it was very album focused also, and so SoundCloud was really important. As a connection tool and also as a place that we were discovering people and putting tracks up. And then the label really has always been very album focused. And so when I joined, he'd put out 4 records, and I was working for a string quartet, doing admin and also doing some graphic design. And one of the artists, whose name is Tambour, his new artist name is Simon Leoza, was someone that I was just gigging with in Montreal, and invited me in to just help work on his release effectively, like just help do some PR and stuff. And we had, the 3 of us had a drink together, and by seeing like how passionate Evo was about everyone he's working with, how artist friendly everything is, and also just my training is in experimental music, and so this music was a little foreign to me in a sense. I was also just kind of curious and thought that this could be music that people really liked listening to, and so on the spot offered to buy into the company.
Wow.
Which was
amazing.
Yes, that was 5.5 years ago, and he, to Evo's credit, like the next day, he just I effectively funded a CD run. Was my way of entering, and he gave me all the company passwords the next day. And
wow,
and he's such a trusting and caring individual, and so it's been really. So we've been flying, the 2 of us. That's the summer of 2016.
Wow, that's incredible. Let's talk about, going back to the genre, instrumental music falls more into the experimental category than pop or rock category sometimes, which makes it inherently more difficult to promote, from my experience. But we have a lot of listeners on who are labels of the show and that deal in this weird music space. What advice do you have for labels who are dealing in non-vocal music, ambient music, drone, when it comes to how to promote releases to curators and blogs?
Yeah. The first thing I tell people, and I trust that people running labels are doing this, is just to build a quality catalog. That's the thing we've been working on the longest, is just everything that we put out, we think is really well made. And we put out a lot of music before anyone really listened to it, it was developing that. So I think that, and that comes back to that brand thing you mentioned, is we developed a space where people knew where to find us. And so I think it can take time to promote something of the sort. I really think it took us 2 or 3 years to start really connecting with a larger fan base. And when people started interacting with us more and more, like they'd find like, oh, okay, there's also some really cool stuff back here from artists that we don't know.
Right.
And then a big part of that too was actually like interfacing directly with fans. And so going and finding, it's really hard on the internet. I've heard you talk on other episodes about how the platforms keep changing, how we can't rely on Spotify forever. And it's frustrating. Like we built we have 10,000+ followers on SoundCloud, and that platform is not the same platform anymore. But
wow.
I would say first and foremost, like take the music directly to the people who care about it, and have them vouch for you. And that makes sense. So that includes like blogs and radio stations, podcasts. Like we do a lot of emailing to people directly in the genre, and then in cross genres as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And have you had any success with traditional sites like Stereo Gum or Pitchfork? Have you in the places that normally focus on indie rock? Have you had anything kind of crossover?
Had a couple little things. Like Exclaim has done stuff for us.
Sure.
We've had had something in Pop Matters, had something in Clash.
Oh, that's cool.
Like a couple of the UK ones.
Yeah.
And I'd say like our biggest kind of crossovers are on KXP and BBC, like, more on the radio front.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah. And then and then of course, like we're in a world where sync is big as well. So that's I'd say our biggest exposures end up being through those types of things as well, through placements.
And well, that's really cool. And so that's something you've been focusing on?
That is something that kind of along this line of building a strong catalog is something that we've been pursued by other folks. Like very early on, we've had a lot of sync agencies write to us and see if they can rep our music, and we've had mixed success with different agencies. But we've had music for loads of ballets and events and things like that, and then we've landed some big advertisements and trailers and some Netflix shows. Like it's
that's great.
It definitely like always something we hope more of can happen, because that is just like a really great direct benefit for an artist.
Totally. Yeah. And that goes back to that enabling thing where, their active fans may have no idea that they were used in a documentary or something, but that money enables their next release or a special package or something.
Yeah, totally. And I'd say for an artist, like, if we can somehow land them something that pays for even like a couple months rent, or, buys the new piece of equipment they need for the new record, like that's pretty validating.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I always think of income when it comes to studio gear. Like I always measure things like what piece of gear can I get with this job or this placement? It's a very unhealthy way to live.
Yeah, and I fall prey to that too. Or fall prey is maybe a strange way of saying it. I would say that that has factored into my decision making as well at times. Like, will this? But I mean, there's part of that's our own personal enjoyment, and part of it is actually going to contribute to the work too.
Yeah. I that is true. I usually use that as an excuse as often as possible, but it is true. It is. Yeah. I over the years, I think, wow, you know what, that $2,000 microphone or that $1,000 synth has actually earned its keep over the past 2 years. So, but yeah, I haven't eaten in 2 years, but still, synth sounds great.
You have to balance those. And I mean, I always tell people, I ran a graphic design firm parallel to this for a long time, and I purchased a camera that just changed my life. That I just took pictures, like I cared about taking photos in a super different way. And then I took photos at events and for graphic design for years. And, a tool can definitely open up a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So you're a graphic designer. That's very interesting, because I wanted to ask you about the visuals on your website and the label and the album artwork. And I maybe I'm biased, but I think that ambient music and electronic music often do a great job at pairing album artwork with music. Certainly, when it comes to minimal music, I definitely find it absurd when there's minimal music and it's not minimal artwork. But I think 12K, which we had talked about earlier, Taylor does a great job with artwork on his label, and Geographic North, who we've had on the show, I'm a huge fan of, and of course you guys as well. Talk to me about that role of artwork for your label and your releases.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we have a budget for in every release. Like, we really care about the visual aspect of it. Like, we really still are album people, and so we're thinking of how the music. We're thinking pretty deeply about how the music pairs. Like we do even before kind of Pinteresting. Like we write down like feelings and evocations and visuals that come to mind, and we have a pretty thorough exchange on that. My partner and I. And it's an interesting process with artists. Like we definitely have some artists who arrive and have an artwork in mind, and it's like, this is what I want, this is who I'm working with.
Sure.
And then we also have some who like, hey, you have a great visual aesthetic, like, can you choose something for me? And then we have, I'd say most of the time it's somewhere between that. And we dialogue, like we can exchange hundreds of images for an album sometimes. Like it can be a really intense process. But we're definitely perfectionists, and we're thinking through that. And and I arrived, and that was already the case. Like Evo has a very keen eye, and I do all of the, like with my graphic design background, like there are the occasional cover that I've designed or worked with something that I've kind of touched up, and then I do all the page layouting for, I do all the packaging and everything.
Sure, and that's great.
So it's been a really fun. I don't do as much design anymore, so it's been a fun way to do that, and it's really nice to share good-looking art online as well. And I'm sure we need to keep, like my dream is to keep increasing our budgets to pay people. Like I'm sure we could pay even more for the visual art, but it's really nice also to be able to actually license nice artwork.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think it plays a big role, especially when it's pressed in physical format with tapes and vinyl and even CDs. I've seen great labels do things with CDs that look amazing, and so I think it's huge. I think it plays a role. Do the artists come to the label knowing that that's part of the deal? I mean, do you have kind of final approval on art? How does that relationship work?
Yeah, I think people tend to know now what we're at. So almost everybody that we've worked with has either approached us kind of saying like, I can see that you have a really strong visual aesthetic, or it's something that I love and I relate to.
Yeah.
And yeah, like we do in a sense have final approval, but we also just want to make sure the artist is happy.
Sure.
And so
sure.
I would say we're the types of people who will like, even if an artist arrives with something ready, we'll still, as devil's advocate, bring up a bunch of other possibilities.
Oh, that's nice. I would do the
same. Yeah, and we might still settle on exactly what they're hoping for. Or, like it's really interesting how that works out. And the goal is that no one has to compromise artistically, but of course, every process is a little different.
Yeah, and that's always a tricky thing. I think, especially, not every label has a creative side, and I mean the fact that your label, you are bringing a creative preference to things. I mean, I guess in a curating way they are, but most labels just say, okay, whatever the artist wants, text me the photo and that'll be your album cover. I do see sometimes when conflict comes up whenever the label has creative expectations.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, we're definitely people who we're going to have hard conversations because we do have something going on.
And your fans have an expectation.
Yeah, exactly. There's that as well. Like there's a quality and a look, and actually I think the thing we haven't done yet, I'm just trying to think I think this happened once actually on a single, is we have effectively not had like photos of the artist on, you were talking about Instagram, how we do bring out kind of present the artist, but we do definitely prefer that the artwork is also like an artistic statement.
Yeah. I should ask Taylor about this at 12K, because they have been doing, more so in the last 3 years, they've been doing a very, like a singular design format to all of their releases that I love. I think it's great. But I just wonder, I assume artists are just grateful to be on his label, so that they'll do whatever he says. But
I mean, it's such a great label. Yeah.
But I've always wondered how that conversation goes if an artist comes in and has their own idea.
Yeah, and I mean, we're definitely flexible, and it's the same that we work with artists on music differently. Like we receive some albums that are finished from start to back. And there are artists with whom we work on, like we give feedback on their demos and things like that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
The same with artwork.
Oh, that's interesting. So you are involved in production a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, in the sense that, there are some artists that we sign who are totally just like in the starting phases of a record, and some of them want a lot of feedback, and we'll say like we've had some records where we get 20 tracks and we give them feedback on the demos, and then we hear it at a next phase, and then we choose the 11 or 12 tracks that make the record, and then on the kind of end thing as well, like we'll also just give feedback on even if we have received like a final record or pretty close to final record, like we do give some feedback on mixes, and we definitely, it's always the artist's final call on something like that. But yeah, we're, again, like Evo is the biggest music fan I know, and he listens with crazy detail. And so it can be even just little things like I noticed a little bit of noise here. Was that intentional? Like,
right. Yeah. That's great. I noticed, I remember maybe last year or the year before, maybe 2019, you were doing like a singles series. Is that right? Was that like a summer thing that you were doing?
Yeah, we've done that a couple times actually.
And that is often with artists who aren't necessarily roster artists. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd say about half and half.
Okay. And so what's that relationship like? I mean, you guys have a great thing going on, so I imagine people are game to join you. But often, you're reaching out to some pretty big artists, established artists. That must be kind of a fun process.
Yeah, totally. And part of that is like, again, we're largely we're largely discovering people. Like I'd say that's a large part of what we do. And of course, now that we've been discovering people, we're kind of growing with them as well. But it is also, as music fans in the genre, it's been really nice to be able to reach out to some folks that we're huge fans of, and to say like, hey, are you interested in doing something together? Maybe you have a commitment elsewhere, and like, we just love your work, and would you do a track with us? And then another side of that as well is that we receive, I'd say we receive a demo a day right now. Like it's
wow.
It's a pretty, like, the genre is exploded.
Yeah.
And part of that too is, it's hard to say no all the time, because we listen to everything.
Yeah.
Like we're huge fans. And so sometimes it's like, hey, we're booked up for the year, but maybe this could be a possibility. Like maybe we could do a track, and or maybe like, we love what you're doing. This whole album isn't a fit for us, or this whole collection isn't a fit for us. So, but we really like this track, and we could try to fit it in somewhere.
Oh, that's really cool. And so sometimes you'll just do a single release. And is that with a little bit more of a Spotify focus as opposed to like a Bandcamp focus?
Yeah, I mean, we still put everything out on Bandcamp. Like, yeah. I mean, Bandcamp we've been with them since the beginning, and they've been really, really great to us. And so, yeah, we're always putting stuff together for our fans directly in Bandcamp. And usually, like, sometimes they'll be standalones, but usually we'll think of them as a curated series. So, we've done the summer single series, and we do a collection for Piano Day every year.
Right.
So we'll usually slot them in there if it's just a one-off. But it's something we're really struggling with right now, is that we still want to put out 6 or 7 records a year so that each record has like a really good shot at things, and that we really work them hard. But we also have so much more music coming in that we love, and we're really reticent to overload. Like, if we put something out, we want to put care into it.
Right. Yeah, that's smart. Yeah, I mean, I've been in that position where, not having the ability or the guts to say no, and then you just released something, and you're now 3 weeks away from the next thing coming out, when you really should be continuing to promote that previous record. So that's very, very wise of you to kind of keep the calendar a little spread out.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, because of streaming, like, we're getting a lot of advice not to. It's been really interesting to really actively be choosing not to do this.
Right. Like streaming is kind of calling for more and more quicker.
Yeah, I mean, we have some competitors that put out 5-6 artists a week, and just hope stuff lands. And,
right.
And we received, like, we had someone consulted with us at some point who was like, yeah, just like throw a bunch of stuff out at the world, and just see what lands. And we just we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
We trust, like, our fans care about what we're doing. We're not just gonna put out a ton of music all the time.
Right. Yeah, no, that's good. I have a bone to pick with you and with Bandcamp, and I don't think it's your fault. I think it's Bandcamp's fault. But I always hate whenever I get these emails from you guys from Bandcamp all the time, and I love them. I always love them. But it's like for a pre-order, and it's like months away from the release, or a month away for whatever. And then, like, of course I could buy it right then and there. That is always an option. And then it would be added to my library on release day. But I always hate this, that Bandcamp doesn't give you a way to get an alert on release day as well.
Yeah.
Like, when you publish an album on Bandcamp as a label, then it sends that email out to everyone. But if you publish it as a pre-order, it sends it as a pre-order, and then it doesn't get sent again on release day, as far as I know, at time of recording.
Yeah, and we've received some similar feedback to that as well, and we've sent some direct emails in, and I mean, I think it was John from Asthmatic Kitty that I heard you talking to on this podcast as well, said something along the lines of, like, it's not a perfect system,
right?
But we do think I do love what they're doing.
I love them too. I know. I'm not saying I never speak ill of them.
Yeah, no, but I get it. I mean, there's, and that's the thing for us that we think about too, is like, how are we communicating with our fans? And, like, it's a bummer on release day if you're not getting a notification of, like, hey, you got this email a month ago, but, like, it's not, like, hey, it's like, it's out now, and now you can listen to it.
I mean, but you know what? I think your music lives on so much that when, if I follow a lot of your artists on Spotify, even though I don't even use Spotify as my primary listening device, but I follow them there just so that I get those, so-and-so that I enjoyed their previous EP is now releasing something again. So I think it's a testament to the quality of these records, is that even if I'm 3 months late or 3 weeks late or 3 years late, as I was with the first Jacob David record, which is one of my favorite records of all time. It is an insanely good record. Judith it's just insane. And that is a record that I originally listened to passively, and then now I listen to like insanely actively, like, singing along with the parts in a way. You know what I mean?
That's really cool. Yeah, and he'll be happy to hear that. And that also speaks to how this industry works, is that we put that record out in 2015 and it got picked up on Spotify playlists in 2018. Wow. And so I think a lot of people discovered it later. And I mean, for the whole time that it was out, we were like, Jacob, put out some more music. Like, this is stunning.
Yeah.
And everyone has a different process. And he was, just thinking through what he wanted to work on and wasn't sure what was really working. And so I would say what's been interesting about that more passive discovery is that he has gotten more feedback from people. Like, even if people are discovering it passively now, like there are also, 1 in 100 people engage more actively. And so he's gotten a lot more direct feedback from people. And I think that has been really positive for him.
Well, and you're right. And that 1% stat is probably pretty accurate. I mean, it's, there's a couple playlists in a couple genres that I use on Spotify in that utilitarian way. And but there are times where something just catches my ear and I have to kind of click through and find out what that is. And so you're right. And I've seen that on our label as well, where you might get thousands of streams a day, but a couple of those people will actually hit pause and say, who is this person? And go to Instagram and say, hey, I found you.
Yeah, totally. And in putting together, like, we now have we have a playlist that we curate as well, because we're listening to so much music, and there are a few of those that, as we're putting it together, that it might be someone that I know or don't know, but it might be a track that I'm just discovering. And I honestly, like, there's a couple tracks we put on that playlist that I'm obsessed with, that that I think because of that medium, I wouldn't have interacted so deeply with their piece if it wasn't through this application, which is more passive in nature.
Yes.
It's really interesting. And I've written some people to say, like, hey, I put your track on our playlist and, like, I'm just obsessed with it.
I do the same. I try to tweet out people with this Jacob David record and Chad Lawson stuff as well. When you find these records, it's like, I need to just tell this person just in case they don't get told enough,
Yeah. And that's a good reminder. Like, that's, and I mean, we're talking about, streaming as being passive. I also think that we've seen in the last 10 years, social media become a lot more passive. And we forget sometimes that people really, some people work on the records for years, some people it might emerge quicker, but the amount of feedback that we get, in relation to how much time we've put into something is usually pretty small.
Sure.
And so I would think that those gestures, like, anytime I've received them, anytime someone writes us directly, I respond to every email we get,
That's great.
There might be, sometimes I'm busy and it takes me a while or something falls through, but it's really nice for an artist for you to tweet them out and tell them that.
Do you know if, someone like Jacob David is much loved by the Spotify gods, as you can see on his profile. And do you know if someone like that, and I'm asking you to speak on behalf of the artist, but you don't have to if you don't want to. But do you know if someone like that would be tempted to write music for this medium, to say this is playlist friendly?
Yeah, I mean, to be super frank, it's something we talk about a lot with artists. And what we tend to tell people is what we talked about a little bit earlier, is like, just write the best piece, and put it out if you think it's the best piece. And yeah, like, Jacob is definitely someone who is just writing a lot of music and a lot of really, really well-crafted and beautiful music. And usually it will come down to the strategy once the piece is done, or once
Oh, that's great.
Is kind of like, okay, what is this going to fit on? Is this an album track? Is this something that's going to fit on your next record? Or is this something that that you're psyched about putting out? And if so, who's the audience for this? So we're talking about it more at that level of like, what's the best way and time to put something out.
That's awesome. This has been so fun to talk with you. I have a couple more things that I'd like to leave off for our patrons, if that's cool with you. But thank you so much for doing this. It's been such an honor to talk with you. I absolutely adore your label.
Thanks, Scott. I mean, it's really awesome. I'm glad you reached out, and it's been great to discover and dive into what you've been doing. There are so few places where we can dive into the world of labels, and you have interviewed so many labels that I love, and so
I've
got like a list now that I've been going through. So,
awesome. And thank you all for listening. If you want to hear the rest of my interview with Nick, go to patreon.com/otherrecordlabels, where we talk a little bit further. And we play our game that we play with all of our guests. And you can hear all of those bonus episodes by becoming a patron. And please think about it. Go to patreon.com/otherrecordlabels. Thank you so much for listening. To find out more about this incredible record label, go to modernarecords.com. They're also on Bandcamp. You can just search Moderna. And I hope that you've really enjoyed this episode. Thanks so much for being a listener.